Hello, Atharla. Welcome to Stories, Legends and Wonders of Oran. Oran is also known as Inis Mór, the largest of the three Aran Islands. I'm Dara Malloy, Dara O'Mailia as Gaeilge.
Hello, today the episode is in Kilronan village, where I'm going to show you and tell you about 4 places and 4 stories connected with the village. The first is An Bhean Bháite, the drowned woman, who is buried way out on the end of this track here, next on my right. The second story is about this beach here, which is called Frenchman's Beach, and I'll tell you how it gets its name. The third story is about the Celtic Cross in the middle of Kilronan village. And the fourth story is the story of Ronan himself, who gives his name to the village Kilronan and the place where St Ronan is buried. I'm bringing you first to a place called An Bhean Bháite, the drowned woman. And it's out at the very end of this track. This track runs out northwest from Kilronan village, from the pier, past the glamping, past Frenchman's Beach, and on out along the coast until you get to the end of the track altogether. And you come across a gate into a field. And if you go into that field, then you'll find the grave of the drowned woman. Her body was found probably in the early 1950s, and she had been washed ashore from Connemara. That was clearly evident from the clothes she was wearing. And it was clearly evident also that she was pregnant. And that, of course, leads to the conclusion that she died of suicide. Because in those days, in the 50s, it was hugely disapproved of for any woman to become pregnant outside of marriage. The man who caused the pregnancy got off scot-free, but the woman was severely punished and put into hiding or sent away somewhere until she had the baby, and then the baby was taken off her. So it was a huge source of shame for the whole family and even for the whole neighbourhood. So this poor woman who got pregnant clearly couldn't cope with all of that and simply let herself fall into the sea and drown, and her body is washed ashore here. Her grave is now a place of pilgrimage, especially for women, because women in today's society even are still struggling with that whole attitude of society towards them in their pregnancies, especially in pregnancies maybe that they don't want, or in pregnancies that are disapproved of by their family. So it's still a place that has meaning and resonance for people here today, and people still go and visit her grave and pray at her grave, even though there's only 2 stones marking the grave. She was buried by a local here who probably found the body and just buried her in a shallow grave and marked it with 2 stones, but it's clearly evident as a grave today. So now we're looking at Frenchman's Beach. It's not looking its best today because the tide is out and it's covered in seaweed, but it's actually a wonderfully attractive beach in the summer for children to swim on, and it's very safe because the water doesn't get deep quickly like on some of the other beaches around. It's also a great bird sanctuary. There's always a lot of birds around here, and bird watchers come, of course, like myself, to have a look and see what's here at any one time. But it got its name, Frenchman's Beach, because probably a few hundred years ago, we don't know the exact date, a lot of bodies were washed ashore of men, and it turned out they were all French. So it seems like a big sailing ship got caught in a storm and they were all drowned, and all of the bodies are washed ashore on this beach here. So from that time on, it's known as bhFrancach, or Frenchman's Beach. I brought you now to the place where the Frenchmen are buried. We're right beside the beach still, we're just across the road from it. And on my front here is Kilronan village, where the pier is. And then there's a little road running up past us here to my right, which would lead up to the primary school, the Kilronan Primary School, and the playground. So this is where we are, and this is where the Frenchmen were buried. And we don't know how many of them there were, but you can see 3 or 4 stones here marking the grave. I'm standing beside one here. So definitely this is where they were buried, and it's where they're remembered, and it's where the beach gets its name. We've arrived now at the centre of the village of Kilronan, and this cross here marks the centre. And all around me here are the craft shops, the shops selling the Aran Island sweaters, and we have a restaurant here on my left. We have a pub here behind me, and just up from us a bit we have the main grocery shop, and then down below me you have the two piers, the Shan Cave beside me here, which is the old pier, and then the new pier, which has been extended many times over the years and has our ferry tied up at the side here. So this cross here is erected by the islanders and a few friends in memory of the Reverend Michael O'Donoghue, who was the parish priest here for 11 years. And this, he's called a benefactor of Aran. I'll tell you about him now in a minute. But this cross was erected in 1893. So Father O'Donoghue came here at a very appropriate time, maybe a time of great suffering you could call it too, of the Aran Islands, because it was immediately after the famine. So the famine took place 1847 to 1850, and it was after the famine when, of course, the Irish population was decimated, went from 8 million to 4 million, 2 million of whom died of hunger, and the other 2 million emigrated to places like the United States and Canada. So that's the background to this monument. When the famine was over, a state organisation called the Congested Districts Board was established by the British government to try to help the remaining populations in the west of Ireland to come to terms with their poverty and to be able to improve their state. So it was Father O'Donoghue then, as the parish priest here, who would have lobbied on behalf of this community to that Congested Districts Board, and obviously he was very successful. They came out here, they assessed the place, and they decided that the best thing to help this community would be to provide grant aid for larger fishing boats. But fishing boats then would need a proper pier to tie up on, and the pier that we had until that time was in Killeany, in the village of Killeany, which is only a small pier and is very tidal, so it's not suitable for large fishing boats. So that meant the Congested Districts Board developed the pier here that would stretch out into deeper waters and allow the fishing boats that the locals could get with the grant aid from the government to tie up there. And that was the beginning of Kilronan becoming an important village. Until then, it was really a backwater. Killeany was the main village. So you could say Kilronan was founded in the 1850s, probably on the basis of the work done by Father O'Donoghue and his people. And it led to a lot of other infrastructure being created here. So not only was a new pier built and larger boats provided for the islanders, but the rest of this village began to get developed as well. So we got the Coast Guard station, we got the barracks, we got accommodation for the officials of the government who had to be stationed out here. We got a new church built, Protestant church for those officials who are mostly British and therefore Protestant, and a school for their children. So all that infrastructure began to be built here in the village, and it still represents the heart of the village, all these old structures that are still here today. The cross itself was carved by a sculptor called James Pearce, who had connections with the west of Ireland. But he's most famous for being the father of Patrick Pearse. Patrick Pearse is regarded as one of the patriots of modern Ireland. He was one of the leaders in the revolution in 1916, went into the GPO with a gun which he'd never held in his hand before, and led the revolution. So the cross is only carved on one side with the beautiful Celtic knotwork which you see there. It must have taken him an awful long time to do that. Very intricate work, and there's even animals in behind the first frame of it there if you look closely at it. So a wonderful piece of sculpting. And then at the very top is the Celtic Cross, and this is part of our whole Irish heritage, this circle around the Christian cross, which you'll not find anywhere else. And from my research, it seems to me that before Christianity at all came to Ireland, that we had this symbol of the sacred, which was a circle with a plus sign in the middle. And the circle would have represented the universe, the sun, the moon, and then inside it would have represented the four divisions of the year. So if the circle represented the cycle of the year, the four divisions would be the four directions, north, south, east and west, the four seasons, spring, summer, autumn and winter, and the four elements, earth, air, fire and water. So all of these things were central to the spirituality of the Celtic peoples long before Christianity. So when Christianity arrived, they kept this sign of the sacred which they already had, and they elongated it a little bit and horizontally as well as vertically to turn it into the Celtic cross we have today. So this cross represents not just Christian Ireland but pagan Ireland as well. We're now at the western outskirts of Kilronan village. We're heading uphill, and I'm just standing outside Joe Watty's pub, and I'm going to walk down the hill now to show you St Ronan's Grave and St Ronan's Hermitage. So I brought you now to St Ronan's. It's his grave, according to tradition, but it may also be where he lived in his hermitage. And clearly he's given his name to this village, and that's important for the whole village to be called after a saint. You'll find many villages around Ireland called after saints, and usually the name of the village begins with K-I-L, and then you get the name of the saint after that. So K-I-L is the English translation of C-I-L-L, kill, which means a cell, a monastic cell. So the saint here, or anywhere which is called a kill something, is the monastic cell of the saint who lived there. So these saints were hermits. They lived on their own until maybe a community developed around them. But a lot of them never had a community develop around them, and it doesn't look like this St Ronan had any community develop around him. He's alone here, which is the way many Irish saints lived. So as the spiritual focal point of this village, once a year there is a procession, a Christian procession called the Corpus Christi procession, and the procession ends up here and then turns around and goes back through the village and back to the church. So this marks the spiritual focal point, if you like, of the village. This local place is also called an Atharla, which is the Irish word for a burial place. So it's the burial place of St Ronan, which means it's a sacred place, and his name is carved on the stone here in the wall behind me. And just to illustrate how amazing this island is, it has something like 12 saints remembered here. So St Ronan is one of them, but we have St Enda, we have St Killeany, we have St Killeany, we have St Cerny, we have the monastery of the four saints, so if I can remember their names, Brecon and Brendan and Fursey and Conal, those four. And then over west on the island of St Coleman, and later on we have St Brecon who founded the seven churches. So we have a huge amount of saints commemorated here on the island, which is most unusual to have that many, but it illustrates how this island was a monastic island and attracted huge numbers of people who wanted to live the monastic life. This is all in the medieval times.
These stories and all the other stories that are to be found on the Aran Islands can be found in my book Pocket Guide to Oran, Legends in the Landscape, and that's available from our website www.aislingpublications.com, with Aisling spelt AISLING, so aislingpublications.com.